Welcome to the Prosperity Playbook. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. We had mentioned in our last episode that we were going to be talking about abusive relationships. And so here we are. We think it's really important to touch on this because unfortunately, this can happen to everyone. Even we were just talking a few minutes ago. It feels like this happens to the most independent, strongest women and the people that you would never think would be in an independent relation or in an independent relationship, in an abusive relationship, end up being in them. And so we just wanted to talk on it. We have a little bit of personal experience with this. We have friends who have experienced this. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in.
Yeah. And I think a good place to start is, what does it look like? Because I think the stereotypical abusive relationship is somebody is hitting the other person. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it always looks that way. In fact, I would be as bold as to say that sometimes the physical abuse is not as bad as some of the mental or psychological abuse, because bones can heal fairly quickly with, a doctor, and our emotions and our feelings and our brains take a hell of a lot longer to heal sometimes.
Well, it's more believable to see a black eye than to know what's happening behind a closed door.
Well, that's an excellent point. There's very clear signs. You're more likely to have somebody asking you what happened. Whereas if it's an emotional situation, you might not recognize it. And certainly there's a good chance other people won't either.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to convince yourself like, oh, it's not that bad. It's, he loves me, when it is mental, emotional, whereas it's a lot quote unquote easier to, if you tell a friend like, yeah, he hit me, they're going to be like, get out of there. But if you tell them like, he calls me fat every time that, I walk in the house, and they might be like, well, have you talked about it? Have you guys tried couples counseling? And yes, we, as listening to this podcast, communication and therapy, we strongly believe in, but in an abusive relationship, those aren't things that are a two-way street. You can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and it's not going to change things.
Well, if they're good at manipulation, we didn't mention this, but I was in a relationship that was mentally abusive, and we went to multiple counselors, and he was very good at charming them the same way he did me.
I think that's a really good point too. I think it's a lot of times this super charming guy, the good on paper guy, and I'm going to say guy throughout this episode, with the full understanding that this can be reversed as well. I've definitely seen situations where the female was the abusive person in the relationship as well, but just for continuity, I'll probably continue to say
and
guy.
And because that's our personal experience too.
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely can be that, that guy that everybody loves. And it's very hard to sometimes even believe it yourself if you're in that relationship with that person.
Yeah. I think a lot of abusive relationships the abuse can seem very small and harmless, but it's not necessarily coming from a harmless place. So one example that I have had personally happen to me and that I have witnessed a lot is constantly needing to know where you are, who you're with, having the location on your phone, having constant knowledge of what is going on. And like, for example, when I was in college, I was dating a guy who lived back in my hometown. And when I would be going to a party with my girlfriends, I had to be constantly responding to his texts. And if I wasn't responding, that meant I was cheating on him, even though I was literally hanging out with my best friends and having a good time and never even considered cheating on him. But he made me feel like I was being a bad girlfriend by literally being a freshman college student, living my life.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot. And I think that starts out innocent enough, and it can definitely spiral into that just total distrust. And I think a lot of it stems from just the insecurity of that person and trying to control everything. And it gets ugly quickly if they can't be in control of that. And in fact, this is a terrible story, but I had a coworker several years ago, and her ex-husband was like that. We would go to a networking event at lunch, and she'd be like, you got to drive. My ex-husband has a tracker on my truck, and he'll know if I'm at a hotel for a lunch meeting, he'll think I'm having sex with somebody. And unfortunately, that ex-husband came back and murdered her later, and it was an awful, awful situation. But, hopefully most of them don't end that way, but it definitely can. So it's a huge red flag if somebody, like, it's one thing to like have your location on each other's phone and so that it's convenient when you can see they're going to be home for dinner or whatever else. But if they constantly need to know where you are, or they get frustrated if they can't, like that can be a huge red flag.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I also have experienced love bombing. Do you girls know what love bombing is?
Tell me about
I
it.
got that too.
So, something that can happen a lot is you can have a partner that is super nasty, that is calling you names, that is putting you down, that is being super controlling, manipulative, etc. And then they will turn around and flip a switch and, oh, baby, I'm so sorry. I love you so much. They'll buy you gifts and tell you you're beautiful. And, it'll never happen again. And the cycle repeats itself over and over and over. And so it makes you feel like you are the problem because, well, they love me, they do these things for me, they buy me these things. But then when it flips to exactly the opposite of that, it's that is an abusive relationship.
You're right. And it looks like, oh, if I could just do this, then we'll stay in this honeymoon phase. And that is literally called the cycle of abuse. I have seen this so many times. And again, unfortunately, I had a best friend years ago, and she was in an abusive relationship, and it was very mentally abusive, but then it would eventually get physical. And she actually told me at one point, sometimes I wish he would just hit me, because then when he would, it would go back to that cycle of, he would be like honeymoon phase and perfect guy. And before he would hit her, it would be this eggshells phase where she was so careful and she was trying not to do anything to piss him off. And then as soon as he got past to where he would actually do something physical, then he'd go back to being the good guy again. And it was like she would just crave that. She would crave to be hit by him. So that it would go back to that.
That breaks my heart.
I didn't ever get the same kind of cycle as that. Mine was, my son was 5 to 11 years old in this time frame. And so it was always good when he was home, because he would be at his dad's 1 week out of every other week. And so when he was home, everything was good. We were like a family. We go ride bikes and get ice cream or do something really fun. And then as soon as he would leave, it would just be the opposite. And I wasn't working at the time because it was so difficult to be able to do that. Whether I wasn't earning enough money or I was getting micromanaged if I was on a commission basis. I owned my own company at the time. We had a construction cleaning company. And he talked me into getting out of that. So I pretty much was at his beck and call with whatever he wanted me to do for him. And he told me it was me getting to take a break. You don't have to earn money for once. And don't you want somebody to take care of you? And my father had died when I was 16, so I had taken care of myself and become very independent and in control of my own life forever. And so I was like, I don't know. This seems really scary to me. And then I remember telling myself, this person has been so nice to you for a good solid year. You should just let your guard down.
Yeah, you deserve
He's
it.
probably fine. Just go for it. Bad idea. Should listen to my gut.
The isolation piece is
they
really
alienate you.
important. Yeah, where it's, they try to isolate you from your friends and your family and your business and your finances so that you are so completely dependent on them.
Yep.
That's scary.
It was.
Well, and I think especially if a friend is like trying to talk them into leaving, if they've been privy, if they've confided in a friend and said this is a dangerous relationship for one reason or another, if they know that, you can pretty much count that they are going to try to cut you out. My friend I talked about earlier, like he would not let her be around me at all because he knew that I knew everything that was going on. And so he would like plant seeds to make me be the bad person. He didn't want her hanging around me. He wouldn't let her hang around me. She wasn't allowed to go to lunch with me. And then it would just be one friend after the other. So there was nobody else in her life except for him. And she needed him. And then he full on had her convinced that she was nothing without him. And I would be like, my gosh, you made him who he is, successful in business. And he just absolutely had her convinced that she had no other path, that she would be lost and homeless without her or without him. And another thing is he was previously a law enforcement officer. And so he had told her, I know every cop in this town. Nobody's going to believe you. You have nothing you can do. And she believed that.
Yep. I dated this one for a good solid year, and my friends told me that they saw it in the beginning, but they never wanted to say anything to me because they figured I wouldn't listen. So neither side's friends or family noticed anything, and they still don't. Yeah. So it was up to me to meet a perfect stranger who noticed.
It's like the Ted Bundy personality where everybody's like, oh, like they're so charming and so cool.
He
and
was
then
handsome too.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And I think that's unfortunately, there's a lot of manipulation that goes into that. I mean, even when you were talking about how your ex-husband would be one person when your son was there and then totally different when he was gone, that's manipulation because he wants his son to see him as, this great husband and this great dad. And so that when you are, wanting to leave and talking to your son about it, he's like, well, I don't see any of that. And it just comes down to manipulation. There's a lot of gaslighting that goes on in abusive relationships too. And if you don't know what gaslighting is, it's basically when somebody makes you doubt your memory or your sanity. Like, oh, I never said that. And clearly they did say that. And that's something that I see happen a lot. And criticism, belittling, blaming you for their behavior. Well, if you wouldn't have done that, then I wouldn't have exploded. And
I think that's a really important point to hit on there. Like, I do think a lot of people that get in these relationships think, well, if I can just stop doing that, or I know not to do that again. And so they will just walk on eggshells like we talked about earlier.
I was walking on eggshells all the time. And I knew after a while, there was nothing that I was going to do or say that was going to make any difference.
Yeah.
It was never going to come out whenever it came out.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing. And the manipulation is a really important word of that too, I think. And this looks very different. I have a teenage daughter, and she had a boyfriend young in her high school career at one point, and when they would be on the phone together and she'd be like, hey, I gotta go. He'd be like, oh yeah, I'm sure, I'm just ugly. Why would you want to talk to me? And he did all of these like just little manipulative things to make her feel bad, to make her say, no, it's not that. And then she'd stay on the phone longer. And I didn't really know that was happening until we were on vacation one time. And I told her to get off the phone. I'm like, hey, we're on vacation. And I heard him say that. And I was like, that's enough. You're done. And hang up the phone. And I talked to her about it. And she was like, oh, no, he's just insecure. And she couldn't see it at the time. And I think that's another key point here too, is that when you're in it, it's very hard to see. But when you're from the outside looking in, it's a lot easier. And so she eventually broke up with him shortly thereafter, but she could see it plain as day after the fact. And she could see it plain as day with his next girlfriend. And I was really glad that she got out of it, but it was really scary to me to see that it was starting that young. And I was like, man, what's this kid's dad like? Like, where did he learn this? What are his parents' relationship, or what's he watching on TV? I don't know. I have no idea where this came from, but it scared the crap out of me. And it was a really good conversation to have with my daughter while she was young enough to be in my house and we could talk about it. But
it's a lot of narcissism, and I don't know that it's necessarily hereditary or learned, but it definitely is part of their psyche.
Well, I think there's a lot of patterns there, though, too. And I think a lot of times people want to stay together for the kids. And I think we've maybe talked about this in a divorce episode before, but that's not necessarily the right answer. Like, you are setting the example for what it looks like for your kids. In fact, I have another friend. See, this is the thing. It's all these powerful women. Like, that's very common in our industry. It's these women that make a lot of money, are really good at what they do. But I have another friend that was married for a long time to this guy, and he would ice her out. So he would just go super quiet. When she would do something that would piss him off, he just wouldn't talk to her for like a week at a time. And that maybe sounds mild, but imagine being in a house with your spouse and not being able to talk to them for a week, not being able to talk about kids' schedules or what's for dinner or anything like that. You crawl in bed and they just roll over and don't talk to you.
Mine moved to a different bedroom.
And then your kids are watching this. And it got to the point where the girls would make excuses for the dad and be like, oh, dad meant to say goodbye to you before he left this morning. And that was what got her eventually to leave, was going, this, my girls are defending this. They think this is normal for their dad to do this, and it's not okay.
Mine was blaming me for not having enough food to take to work the next day. And then I discovered he was getting up in the middle of the night, sleepwalking, and eating the food that I didn't provide.
That's special.
My parents are the couple that stayed together for the kids, and I wish so badly that they wouldn't have.
Wow. That's a bold statement.
I have told them that several times, and it's really hard to watch, but being the kid, I thought that that's what love looked like. And so then I was seeking out unhealthy relationships. And, you know, when I was getting something that my parents have always struggled with is they are not affectionate towards one another. They don't kiss, they don't hold hands, they barely hug. Like they're more like roommates.
We hug.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought that when I was in a relationship where I was getting a bunch of physical attention, that was love. And that was pretty much all our relationship was physical love. There was no depth at all to our conversations or to our relationship. And that was a really, really hard realization for me to have as I started to grow up, was like, wait a second, I think this is really unhealthy, but I don't know what healthy looks like. And I really didn't have models of a good, positive, healthy relationship until I was literally in my 30s. Like I didn't have people in my life where I looked at them as a couple and said, like, that's what I want. That's beautiful. They clearly love each other. They treat each other well. I didn't have that. And so how was I supposed to know what that looked like?
And what does a healthy relationship look like?
Well, I think that's a good point, because I'm on your page, Brett. Like, I didn't have anybody. I can think of like 2 couples in my life right now that I think really have it figured out. And I'm 45. And I've met both of these people within the last 5 years. And for me, that's like, how do you figure it out? And my husband and I went to counseling. I've talked about that on prior episodes when my daughter was 5. And that was my question, is what is it supposed to be, a fairy tale? Like, I don't know what this is supposed to look like. And so I do really feel like nobody knows. And I think it's one thing is, so I'm a CASA, which is a court appointed special advocate. And I've done a lot of training on this stuff, and our brains go to what's comfortable, even if it's bad. So like, you take a kid out of an abusive home and they want to go back to that abusive home because, you know, we think as soon as we remove them and we put them in this loving foster home that they're going to be so grateful and their life's going to be great forever. That's not how it works, because it's not familiar to them and it feels wrong because they don't know it. Their body and their brain is screaming to go back to what they know. And so I think that's why that pattern of abuse continues to happen. And you get out of one relationship and it's very easy to go right back into the next one, not even realizing you're doing it because your body and your brain are pushing you that direction.
A lot of times when people get into a good relationship, they will sabotage it because it feels so uncomfortable for it to be that good. Like, any minute, I'm just going to go ahead and make it implode because any minute it's going to, and I just want to control it.
That's exactly right. And that can happen with marriage. That can happen with a parenting relationship. It can happen in a lot of different ways. And they self-sabotage it, maybe not even knowing that they're doing it.
I would say most of the time not knowing.
Yeah.
You get so used to sitting in disruption and chaos that becomes your normal. And so when you're not walking on eggshells, it's scary. And I think that for me, I mean, that's how our house, we always felt like we were walking on eggshells. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of beautiful things that happened in my childhood, but my parents' relationship is not one of them. And because of that, there was a lot of tension in the house all the time. And I got used to just, my normal was living in tension. So when I went to college and that tension went away, it was like something's wrong. Like the world is about to implode because I wasn't stressed all the time.
Yeah. This is a good point that it just popped in my head for counseling, because so much of what we experienced in our childhood makes us who we are. And then like your first job or your first marriage. And so it's good if you want to know what it should feel like to go to counseling and figure out how to unravel that. So for me, having lost my father at 16, I was always the one trying to fix everything, be super helpful, and it got annoying to people, and I had no idea I was doing it. And then when I got divorced and I needed to work a lot of different jobs and be needed all over the place, I worked at a boys' home, and we were talking about getting paid $11 an hour. We got paid $10 an hour, and that was just a couple of years ago. And the group homes don't exist here anymore because that's a crazy wage. Yeah. But it was very impactful to me because they needed me. So I had to learn how to not need to be needed.
Right, because you take so much of that you learn in your childhood into your relationships as an adult, where all of a sudden maybe you are treating your spouse the way that you saw your parents treat each other, or they do something and it triggers you and you don't know why it triggers you, and then you find out it's because that was something that triggered you as a child. There's a lot of that comes with you that you don't even realize you're dragging along with yourself.
That's absolutely true. And there's a thing called ACEs score, and it can have, I mean, even just your parents being divorced is a point on the ACEs score. That's trauma. It's talking about your level of trauma that you've received, a parent passing away, even just people yelling in your home a lot. And all of those things build up. And the higher your ACEs score are, the more likely you are to have all kinds of issues. It
Is this something that you can do online, or where do you?
I think so. Yeah. It's just ACES is the acronym. If you Google it, I think you can find it. I think counselors can do it. We do it. CPS does it, or CASAs can do that. It's something that it just kind of puts the level of trauma in a way that you can kind of start to unpeel the layers a little bit. But a lot of it does happen when you're kids. And this is actually a really interesting thing that I didn't know. So most people that are adopting kids, they want the little babies. They want the tiny ones that came out of the abusive home because they don't feel like that they've probably actually been traumatized by it. And it's actually not true, because the little baby that's in a home where there's abuse happening, and even if there's just screaming going on, that baby has not developed the skills yet to understand what's going on with the screaming. And so a lot of time you'll take an infant out of an abusive home and put it in a foster home or adoption. That baby will still have massive issues because of how its brain was formed. Like, that is such a critical time before there too. So some of it really, really, truly happens based on just your environment. Some of it actually can be on your genetics. So like if your grandma was pregnant with your mom and was in an abusive relationship, you carry those genes.
Oh yeah, I saw it between my sister and I, and I asked my mom, well, what was it like when you were pregnant with me versus her? And it was drastically different.
Interesting.
A lot more anxiety with my sister.
That actually brings a little bit of peace though too, because I think oftentimes when somebody ends up being in an abusive relationship and they're like, what happened?
How did I get here?
Yeah, it might be that your mom was in the belly of your grandma and she was being abused, and it's just something that is part of your genetics that you didn't even know was there.
Cellular history.
Exactly. Because I think there are a lot of people that end up in abusive relationships that grew up in a very loving household, and they didn't experience any familial abuse or any abuse amongst their parents. And then all of a sudden they find themselves in an abusive relationship, and it's like, what happened? I thought I had it all together. And unfortunately, I think there's just some very manipulative people out there, but also you might have something deep in your DNA that you didn't know was
that
there.
feels good to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
100%. And let's be clear, it's nobody's fault that you ended up in that. Like,
no,
it is not your fault. You maybe chose it. You maybe unconsciously chose it. Maybe your friggin' DNA chose it, but it doesn't matter.
Say it louder for the people in the back. It is not your fault.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you deserve it. And I think that's the other one, where sometimes people self-sabotage unintentionally. I think some people self-sabotage because they don't feel like they deserve better than what they're in right now. And that's a sad place to be too. And all of these things that we're talking about, by the way, there's resources. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will be the first to admit that the mental health resources in our country are not great. And we did a whole episode on mental health. If you somehow skip that, go back and watch it. I think it was actually a really good one. But get the help that you want. Find a counselor. Find somebody. If you're in an abusive relationship, find your local resources. In Bozeman, we have this amazing organization that's called Haven. It's the first line of defense. And I think as somebody who's had multiple friends go through situations like this, it's damn near impossible to know what to tell them. And what I have learned is the best thing you can do is just believe them, whether it's physical or mental, or even if it's just financial abuse and they don't have any control over their finances. You just believe them and you listen. And the worst thing you can do is constantly just tell them to leave. If you can't understand why they stay and you just say, why aren't you leaving? Why aren't you leaving? Why aren't you leaving? They will stop talking to you. And I will promise you that from personal experience. I was lucky enough to have a conversation with one of my friends who was able to, well, she was able to get out of an abusive relationship. And I told her at one point, I said, I failed you. I just told you to leave. And I know now that that wasn't the right thing to do. And she just said, thank you. And she said, you're 100% right. I just had to stop talking to you because you just made me feel worse, because all you kept saying was, why don't you leave? Why don't you leave? And it broke my heart, but she was 100% right. And I don't know what the right answers are. Let's be clear. I think it's different in every situation, but getting help is the answer. And I think starting with a place like Haven, we did talk prior on our mental health issue episode, couples counseling. If you're in an abusive relationship, couples counseling is actually not recommended because it can set up a very unsafe situation for you at home after you leave that counseling session. So be very, very careful about that. And maybe instead seek Haven or some individual counseling.
Yep, like I mentioned, the stranger recognized what was going on with me and offered to hand me off to girls at Haven. And so he always would donate dinners for their group meetings. And he took me, or had me come meet him where he was going to meet them, because it was an undisclosed location back then. They have a brand new spot now that's beautiful. Yeah. And
we talked about this off of the podcast earlier, but Courtney was waiting tables when she was in her abusive marriage, and a stranger recognized that something was wrong and wrote down his phone number and just said, if you ever need help, call me, and ended up being like a dad to her.
Yep. So we're still in touch, and he does this with a lot of different people. But it's great to have the resources that we do. And then even the phone number that you mentioned before, or what was the app now that you can get counseling?
Finch? Oh, BetterHelp.
BetterHelp, yes. So if you feel like you can't talk to somebody locally, or you can't go somewhere, or you can't afford it, that's a good option to be able to get some direction.
Yeah, and Haven they have text resources, they have internet chat resources,
attorneys.
Yeah, and they are very good at understanding how secretive you need to keep it. They know how to not get you in trouble, and so that's why I think that's the place to start. But yes, then they have legal aid that they can help you. They can help get restraining orders if that's necessary. They can help with the bridge to go to the next housing place, because I think that's a big, huge barrier for a lot of people. Maybe even if you're not in an abusive relationship, but just in a relationship you don't want to be in, figuring out, how am I going to go afford to live in this town by myself now? How am I going to afford all my kids' things on my own? Like, all of these things are daunting, but there's resources there and there's people that want to help you.
What are some reasons that people don't leave an abusive relationship?
Well, one thing that always popped in my mind was that we had a group of friends, and they're going to disown me, basically. And so I didn't want to lose the friends, and people weren't going to believe me what I was dealing with.
Well, I think that's a big one. Like you said, if there's no black eye, people are like, what are you talking about? Because
he's so nice.
And I think that's one of the reasons we do this podcast, is to just try to spread information. And by the way, if this resonates with you, if this is a helpful podcast, please like, share, subscribe. We want you to send this to other people. We want these messages to reach as many people as we can, because we genuinely care, and we want other people to be able to recognize these signs and to normalize that it's okay. You're not the only one that's been through this. And if we can help one person get out of a relationship like this, then it's all very, very worth it. So I think just being able to recognize what these signs are, I think a lot of people, though, don't want to admit that they're in an abusive relationship. It's that whole stigma of if there is no black eye, I'm fine. They don't recognize that the control or the tearing them down. One of the things I always equate to it is, it's like, I think that they take these strong, powerful women and they find the one little thread of insecurity and they just pull on it until it unravels. And then they make you feel like nobody else wants you and you're nothing without them and you have to be with them. And none of that is true in most cases. Like, you just have to believe in yourself a little bit and recognize that that's just straight manipulation and trying to control you.
I
Yeah.
feel like mine could have been a whole Lifetime movie. I found out after the fact that somebody that knew him very well said, oh yeah, he told me in a bar one time that he just needed to get married so that he could get divorced, and then say that he was married so that it didn't look like something was wrong with him.
Oh,
I mean, that's pretty far out there to
Can you imagine being that friend? You're just like, yeah, okay.
yeah, like, talk about a mental illness.
And then after we got divorced, he put our wedding picture up on the wall in his house. And I was like, that is so weird.
What the hell?
Yeah,
Well-
there were so many things that happened that I couldn't even like begin to explain what the hell.
Well, I want to take a minute to acknowledge the courage that you have in sharing your story. And it's not an easy thing to do, especially in a small town like this. There are people that know who you're talking about, and it's a hard thing to share. And there's probably people that know who I'm talking about in the 3 different scenarios that I've talked about. And that's a hard thing too. And hopefully I don't get in trouble for talking about this. But like I said, the goal is to help other people that are in these situations. And if you have a friend that's in a scenario like this, you can reach out to Haven. One of the things I did after my friend was murdered by her ex-husband, I reached out to Haven and I was like, I feel so helpless and I don't know what to do. How can I be a part? And I joined their fundraising committee and helped them plan some fundraisers. But through that, I went to some of their programs. They have one that was called Out of the Darkness, I think. And it was survivors telling their stories, but it talked about this cycle of abuse. And there were so many things that just clicked into place in my head where I was like, oh, and I could just see it. It was like checking every single box, and it validated so many things for me that I just couldn't put together before.
We just did a donation program, fundraising program with them. So maybe it'd be good for me to follow up with them and find out if they could do something for the friends to tell us, educate us how to help somebody in that situation.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. I think, again, just being able to recognize it and be there to support and refer to the professionals is the hugest thing, because it is a very tender thing. Like, honestly, I don't want to be the one that's telling them what to do and how to get out of it, but I want to be able to connect them with the resources to do that.
Well, especially because I think for a lot of people, leaving an abusive relationship isn't just hard, it's actually very dangerous. Like your friend who unfortunately was murdered. I mean, that's a real possibility for a lot of people. Or, the fear of retaliation is very real. So having a resource available where you aren't just leaving and on your own, but having somewhere that you can go that has the resources, like you said, that can help get a restraining order and put some protection in place, can be the only way that you can get out sometimes when there is genuine fear for your own safety.
And Haven has a safe place for you to go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think just being willing to stand up and say that this is a dangerous situation. With my friend Lauren that was killed, I can say her name. There's an actual whole true crime drama episode about it. But she tried to like just turn the other cheek and be cheery about it all the time. And like, it's in the past. And there was only one person that I know of that she actually talked to that knew how dangerous it really was. And I always wonder if she had shared more about that, if there had been more of a police presence, like could it have been avoided? You just never know. So I think not being afraid to share that and being that safe friend, that just believing them and knowing that unfortunately, this is crazy common.
Mm-hmm.
And being the stronger, independent female, it is a really hard thing to ask for help. Yeah. It's a really hard thing to acknowledge that you're weak in an area.
Yeah. And you're right. And I think there's this whole boss babe mentality right now. I was just having this conversation yesterday with some friends. Like, I'm so freaking over that. Like, yes, I want us to be strong. I want us to be powerful, but that doesn't mean that we don't ever ask for help. I think one of the most important things we can do as strong females is acknowledge when we need help with something. Like, we have to. We should not be expected to be superwoman and do absolutely everything and perfect mom and perfect wife and perfect cook and make multiple 6-figure income and do all of this stuff. Like, that is not how the world is supposed to work. Everybody is in this social media world. Everybody wants to look perfect all the time. And I'm here to tell you that pretty much nobody's perfect and everybody has their shit. So we need to normalize asking for help and saying, hey, this isn't going well for me. And hey, if you're in a relationship where you feel like something's off, you should be okay to talk to somebody else about that and be like, hey, so this just happened. How do you feel about that? And you got to be careful who you share those things with, because there are, I hate to say this, but there's also a lot of religious abuse out there as well, where you will go and you'll maybe talk to somebody in the church and the church will be like, well, it's your duty as a wife. And that is extremely common and nobody wants to talk about that. But let me just tell you, I know people that have been in that boat too. I know a lot of people that have been in that boat, and it is your job to just do what your husband tells you.
Let me just culture. It could be your culture too.
It absolutely can be your culture. And I think the world as a whole is shifting away from that. And I thank God that is the case. So if it feels wrong, like, trust your gut.
Yeah, I mean, you asked earlier, what does a healthy relationship look like? And I feel like there's a couple things that come to mind for me. And the first, that is something that I learned in adulthood, is that confrontation should not always lead to conflict. When you are in a relationship with somebody or a friendship, or, if you have any sort of working, active relationship with another person, you should be able to discuss disagreements without it being a big blow up fight. You should be able to have a calm, open conversation about your different views. And, okay, yeah, we're human, so we're going to get heated sometimes, but being able to say, you know what, I need to take a minute, collect myself, and then be able to come back to that conversation. To me, that is what a healthy relationship looks like. And having, shared responsibilities and open conversation between the two of you, that is a healthy relationship. Every relationship is going to have its flaws. We are all flawed. Every single person has flaws. So of course, no relationship is going to go without conflict, but conflict shouldn't be the things that we talked about earlier. Conflict should be, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this. Can we talk about it? Or,
exactly,
hey, it's a really big pet peeve of mine to have a bunch of dishes in the sink. Can we talk about it?
Oh, that's my husband's pet
peeve. Well, yeah, my husband's is clutter in general. Like, everybody's thing's a little different. And just because you have a husband that's picky about certain things, we're not saying that's an abusive relationship. Like, everybody's got their stuff. But I do think being able to speak up and be who you are, you need to feel like you can be you. I think that's maybe the most important thing. And you need to be able to have your own life. Like, if your only social life, your only interaction outside the house is as a couple, like, you should have something that is just for you. And maybe you haven't done that, not because you're in an abusive relationship, but just because that's what you've done. And it's time. Like, I think it's time for all of us to have something that is just for ourselves. And I think that especially like my mom's generation, it was selfish if you had something for yourself. My mom will flat tell you that she should not have something for herself. And it's not because she's in an abusive relationship. That's just the way that generation thought.
My mom too.
And I think it's that's changing. And I think it's okay to have something for yourself. So that to me is a big part of it. And like you said, it's okay to have an argument. In fact, I actually think it's a red flag if there's never an argument.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
I wanted to be like my son's friends' parents who are Italian. Ooh, they could have some heated dinner conversations, but that was normal.
Yeah.
And nobody got mad at each other. Nobody was hurt. That's just the way it was.
Yeah, you could just get to air everything out.
And I think being respectful around that too. I think if there's one of the things that I've always thought was good about my husband's and my relationship is we don't say things that I would regret. Like, I would never like name call or say something super hurtful, because I know, my dad has been through some really rough relationships, and he remembers the things that some of those women said to him, and it haunts him, and it like broke him down a little bit. So I think you do have to be careful how you fight. You need to fight fair. You need to say that. And I've talked about this before. You need to be able to listen. That was one of the
say
things.
you're sorry.
Absolutely. You need to be able to.
If you were at fault.
If you genuinely were at fault. Not to be the people pleaser and just like, it's my fault, it's my fault, it's my fault. In your marriage, you don't have to do that.
Right.
Like, I do think it's important to take responsibility when you do mess something up, because we are human. Like you said, we're all going to make mistakes, but that should be okay. You should be allowed to make some mistakes, and, just have a civil conversation about whatever it is that's going on. Big things, little things, your opinion needs to matter.
And try to hear each other listening.
Exactly.
I think you mentioned that in another episode too, about trying to actively listen and not have it come back.
I did. Yes, that was me. That was me being the guilty party of
I've done it too.
Listening only to figure out how I was going to make it his fault and kick it back on him. And that, honestly, when I look back on that now, that is gaslighting. And I was doing that, and I didn't realize it, and I didn't mean to. But instead, what I needed to do was listen to what he was actually saying and try to figure out what I needed to do to fix it, instead of like shutting him down and then being mad that he didn't want to talk to me. Like, big freaking surprise.
Yeah.
Why the hell would he want to talk to me if that's all I'm doing and I'm not actually listening? So whether it's kids or family or whomever it is, I do think really consciously listening. And sometimes it's about shutting up and going, say more about that. But if you're the one that's being constantly overpowered and you don't get to have your opinion, and I think that's where the problem arises.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes just saying, hey, can we talk about this, instead of just jumping right in it, especially right when they get home. These are all the things I've learned in counseling over the years.
Yeah, me too.
Don't address it right when they walk in the door.
I do just want to mention, if you are in an abusive relationship, if you don't know where to go, maybe you have been isolated and you don't have that person in your life that you can call, there is a national domestic violence hotline that you can call. It's 1-800-799-SAFE, 7233, 1-800-799-SAFE, or you can go to thehotline.org and they can help. It's kind of similar to Haven that we were talking about, where they can match you with your local resources and can help you get out. So if you need help, please don't feel like you're alone. You are not alone. And I guarantee that there are plenty of other women, plenty of other people, even just in your community, that are going through the same thing. And there is a way out. You just have to be willing to take the first baby steps and to be super scared and do it anyways.
I think that's great advice. Knowing somebody else has been through it. And if you are somebody that's successfully gotten out of a relationship like this, I encourage you to share your story, because I think there's healing power of that, not only for yourself, but you can also help change somebody else's life. And one of the best things we can do for ourselves when we're feeling broken is help somebody else that's also feeling broken.
I have a friend who started a group on Facebook to help people. She called it Climb to Safety, and it's part of a band that we all follow, but it like became this huge thing, and so many people have been redirected out of bad relationships just in that group on Facebook.
That's amazing.
There
I
could
love
be
when
other
social
ones
media
too.
does what social media was supposed to do.
I know.
Yes, bring people together and help. I agree.
What a concept.
Yeah, it's so fun to see some of the women that I know were in narcissistic, abusive relationships, and they got out because of our encouragement, and hearing our stories on there of how we recognized it. You're not crazy. Yeah, it's not going to change. And now she's with another guy that's treating her so well. She just went through cancer, and he was just her life support. It was amazing to watch the transition. So there's hope.
There's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We support you. We're here for you. We love you.
I have a great husband now.
You know what I think that's the note to end on. Is it is easy to drag this baggage from relationship to relationship, but I do want to give you hope that you can have something different, that you can heal from that. You can heal yourself and you can get into a good relationship. Courtney's living proof of that.
Well, I got to go cry now. Thank Thank you all so much for tuning in. We so appreciate it. Please share this with a friend if you think it would be impactful for them. And we will see you next week. Here's to empowering each other one story at a time.